Well, the financial advice industry in Australia, to my opinion, at least anyway, is in a serious mess. It's been so bad and so expensive that many Australians have simply turned away from it. The big banks, they've sold their financial planning divisions at the loss, in many cases, of more than billions of dollars after the Royal Commission. More than 10,000 financial advisors are said to have walked away from the industry because of the weight of red tape and the never-ending threat of legal or regulatory action. And yet, the need for financial advice has never been greater. Superannuation balances are growing. Retirement planning, well, that's complex. And this is why a Treasury report this week called the Quality of Advice Review under the guidance of lawyer Michelle Levy is such an important breakthrough. Michelle Levy joins me now in the studio. Michelle, many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I know you sort of put yourself down a little bit, but this report, these recommendations, 22 of them to the government, I think are absolutely vital because what I say is people are walking away from it, trying to do it themselves in such a complex area as retirement planning. That can't be a good thing.
No, it's an appalling thing, actually, where I think somebody has described us all as financial citizens, but we don't all have that sort of level of financial literacy that we need to make sensible decisions in our own interests.
But the problem is, as I see it, is that the regulation and also, if you like, just the fact that so many financial planners walked away, it means that if I want to walk in and get impartial, independent advice, the price is prohibitive for most Australians.
That's right. There are 16,000 financial advisors in Australia, and it costs a lot to get advice. They then move to the wealthier end and older end of the population.
Naturally, because that's what you do as a business, right?
That's it. And so then everybody else is left to their own devices.
But the banks were supposed to fill that gap. They were supposed to sit there and tell us. But the problem for the banks these days, they've discovered they can't even tell you whether you should go into that term deposit or this term deposit.
Well, that's it. And this is an issue with financial advice. It's such a huge range of stuff. It ranges from that complex financial plan right through to, should I open a term deposit? Should I make an additional contribution to superannuation? All of that is you're left on your own. Banks, superannuation funds, insurance companies, they won't give you a straight answer.
OK, so then if you walk into a financial planner, the first thing that they've got is the know my client rule, right?
Yep.
So they've got to do a complete assessment of you, which is expensive to do, and they've got experience.
Yep.
So then you suddenly get through all of that and you say, well, OK, should I pay my credit card off? It's a pretty simple question for something that's taken such a large amount of time and money to achieve.
That's right. And that is, again, another problem with the regulation. It assumes all financial advice is that complex sort of financial plan.
Like the retirement planning type
Exactly.
stuff. Yeah. So in other words, what type of annuity product should I have?
Yeah.
How should I, get to my sort of transition to retirement? Whatever that's more complex.
Yes.
The basic stuff should be pretty simple.
It is simple. It really is, but you can't get that answer. And it's because of the weight of regulation. It's ill-suited to its purpose.
OK, so some say that the answer is robo-advice, that it's actually using computers, using that type of knowledge, that is the future to provide the simple answers. Is it as easy as that?
Well, I think that is a big part of the answer, but you may well want a human sort of between you and the institution that's providing that robo-advice. So I think, again, that is one of the reasons we don't need to rely on the 16,000 financial advisors, because if you go to your bank, the bank will have the algorithm, the computer program that gives the customer service operator the answer to most problems. OK, but then there was always conflicted advice. Yep.
There was the advice where the banks or the insurance company would say, yes, here's your advice, you're going to our product. That was conflicted advice. There was always the situation of commissions. You will go here because that commission pays me the largest amount of money. All of this was all part of the reason why people became more sceptical about the independence of the advice they were receiving.
That's true. The question I have, though, and that I was grappling with is, how do I get advice from somebody other than somebody who has an interest in it? Now, that interest might be that they get paid a fee. My financial advisor model that I've said, you pay a fee, you get the independent financial advisor who can't have a conflict. But if I'm wanting advice and I don't have the capacity to pay a fee, I have to go to someone who has some interest in giving it to me. And so what I'm trying to do with my recommendations is acknowledge that interest that the bank has, that the superannuation fund has, and say, despite that, you have to give good advice, fit for purpose.
And so would that, do you think, to your mind, be one of the key recommendations that you've made of these 22 recommendations that government should and needs to implement in order for people to get an advancement in the advice they're receiving?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. Yep. So Stuart Robert, I spoke with him earlier this week, the opposition financial services spokesperson.
Yep.
He says that the opposition will completely and thoroughly endorse your report. He wants it to go through. Do you think you're going to get the same attitude from the federal government?
Well, I think they're a little bit more circumspect, and they are confronting, Choice, who is, saying stuff about their concerns with it. So, look, I really hope.
And so the concern is this about this notion of independence, isn't it? And impartiality. And who can give that So they want absolute clean skins right the way through. But the problem, as you're discovering, is that to have a system like that, it makes it too prohibitively expensive for most Australians. And that can't be a good outcome.
No. Moreover, it isn't that hard to give good advice on most questions. So if I go to the bank and I say, I want to open a term deposit, the person is going to say, well, of course, you're going to have a term deposit with the Commonwealth Bank. What I want them to be able to do, though, or have to do, is say, but you've got a great big credit card debt, Michelle. You really should pay that off first. But they can't and they won't.
So this goes to the heart of personal advice versus general advice, doesn't it? That's the key.
It.
In other words, I can sit there and say to somebody who rings up now, say, you should take the cheapest mortgage that's out there right now. Here it is. That's the cheapest mortgage. Your choice. That's general advice.
That is. And it's, it's worse. It's, in my view, it's poor quality advice, often.
Yes.
It's usually advertising.
And there's your problem, because you don't want it to be advertising. You actually want it to be sincere, that looks after the interest of the individual.
That's right. Relevant to the individual. Good advice.
Good advice and sound. Well, I've got to tell you, Michelle, it's a great report. People in that industry should certainly read it. And we do hope that the government takes up many of those points as well.